guess.
So the question is how I approach the layout and how I engage the publisher in publishing the layout. Well, now, in one area I'm extremely fortunate in that I am with the same publisher. As I'm sure many people have experienced, we change jobs, people lose their jobs, people are, shifts in sort of, in the hierarchy of a company take place. This goes way back to 1998 when they had House of Leaves, and I sent them this document, and basically it had notes about how I wanted it typeset, because I assumed that the publisher would come along and they would say, okay, well, we'll do it according to your notes. And they wrote back and said, no, we're gonna publish it as is. Can't do that. And so there was a whole kerfluffle, but they ended up actually giving me the keys to the publishing house, and I flew out on my own dime. I was descending into credit card debt at that point, and my sister, who's just an angel, said, "You just have to go. Just go. If you go there, they will make room for you." And that's what I did, and I started typesetting the novel according to my notes. Most of it came down to chapter 9, which is the labyrinth chapter. And at first everyone thought it was crazy, but I was really industrious. I was getting up at 5 o'clock in the morning, and I was getting Starbucks coffee. And back then Starbucks, was new. They were using this old 7-Eleven ground stuff. And I mean, 7-Eleven coffee's fine if you just want to get high on chemicals, but it's a new experience of coffee. And so I sort of grounded, so people would come in and at 7 or 8, and I was already there working for a few hours, and they could smell this fresh coffee, and well, he's crazy, but he's probably okay. And then this went on constantly. I think it was over 2 weeks, maybe it was 3 weeks. But through the course of it, people came in and they looked at the walls and they were like, "Oh, why is that?" And then I would sort of explain a little what was going on. And by the end, they realized there was a whole process to it, and they were excited because we had to do things that they weren't doing. They were like, a lot of the time it's a cookie cutter to a certain degree. There are little nuances here and there, but they don't have a huge range that they can work with. And now suddenly we're like, well, no, we got to get this program. We got to convert this Word document, which was a complete nightmare. The Word document itself, by the way, was the house. It constantly shifted. You put it to bed, and in the morning you'd be like, wait, why is it 1,100 pages? I was terrified. And so I finally was this moment, I never thought it would be so exciting just to turn something into a PDF. And is it a PDF? It's a PDF. It can't change. But still, the next day we look and we go, no, it hasn't changed. And so I grew up kind of with them, and I know those same people are still working with me. And at that point, I think there's one kind of myth that I think a lot of young writers have, which is that somehow your relationship with your publisher is going to be parental. You're going to fight with them, they're going to take care of you. And this is a very bad idea. It's a very bad way of approaching it. It introduces kind of an emotional element that shouldn't be there. But writers do it all the time. You'll see them. They'll fight with their publisher, all of this stuff. I decided early on, and I'm going to thank James Cameron for this, actually, because I remember I saw him talk once, and he said, yeah, the studio's my partner. We both want to achieve something. I want to make my movie, and the studio doesn't want to go bankrupt. And so early on, I sort of said, the publisher's my partner. So how can I make their job easier? So I began to investigate fonts, typesetting programs, things that would also interact with them seamlessly and where they got it printed. And that's how it is today. I basically typeset everything. The Familiar has now an atelier, so there's a bunch of people that are working on it with me. I art direct things, I oversee things. Artists come to me, I meet them when I'm on tour or something, and we sort of incorporate that stuff, and they get an experience of having worked with me a little, and then getting a little credit or something like that, and getting just a little exposure. And that is very, very gratifying. But I'm going to guess the meat of your question is really, how do I approach the writing and the layout? And for me, it happens all at the same time. So when I'm changing the font, when I'm changing even the design of the page, suddenly Xanther's voice is going to modulate, or suddenly this old scientist who had her, meth addiction in the past, she changes based on, not just that she's in a bathtub in a hot Ohio night, but just the way the graphics begin to interfere with the page. And so for me, it's very musical, so I sort of see the many parts and I hear kind of how they talk to one another, and so that's constantly with me. Happens as soon as I'm writing. It's not like I write it all out and then I just kind of typeset it. And you can kind of tell that if you see some books that are written and then you'll see that it's designed by someone else. You don't really know what that relationship is. A lot of art designers have an amazing sense of visual vocabularies, but they're really not invested in the meaning of words. And so how those two things interact is kind of, actually they don't interact most of the time. So in that sense, I think this is kind of new. There are people invested, me primarily, in what the text is saying and how that graphically communicates, what's going on. Yes?
So like the rest of the world probably, I just picked up Unfamiliar Volume 2 about a week ago or something. And I took it home and I set it down on top of Volume 1. And my partner looked at it and was like, "Oh, that's great, you got the second volume, what about the third in the trilogy?" And I was like, "Well, it's not a trilogy, it's 21 volumes." And his jaw like dropped. He was like, fucked up. So he asked me,
I say that a lot.
Yeah. So he asked me, he was like, "Are they all going to be that huge?" And I just had assumed, like, probably, but then he was like, "There have to be, like, novellas or something, like, what the hell?" And so he wanted me to pass that question on to you. Because he can't be here tonight.
He was too scared to show up.
Yeah, he was terrified. But he also, my addendum to that question is, if they're all, like, tomes, like, how?
Great question. All I could say is the how is happening. I just finished Volume 3, so I have about a month and a half of like finishing the artwork and the copy editing and stuff, but it's all being sort of proofed, it's all in, and then I'm already starting to take notes on 4 and how that works. I mean, it's all the kittens in one little basket. I started work on The Familiar back in 2006, so I worked on it for 9 years without any kind of sort of publishing support, and now we're starting to see what happens, I mean, as you probably already experienced, once you read the first one, you kind of are swimming in this very strange, unfamiliar world, but by the time you get to the second one, all of that weirdness then begins to inform more quickly how you read. So you'll instantly know which character you're reading. You'll instantly know what situation you're in. And it helps locate you, and actually you can move quite quickly through it. So one of the biggest complaints I've just heard from Volume 2 is that they really want Volume 3. You can read it in like less than 10 hours. So, but they're all going to be 880 pages long. But they're all, in effect, probably around 200 pages, really. I mean, because of all the sort of spatial play that's going on. I heard one good description. Some guy said, "Yeah, it's just basically a graphic novel where the proportion of text and image has been reversed." Yeah. I'm cool with that.
Can I do like one quick follow-up? How did you decide on 21 volumes?
27, actually.
27?
Yeah.
How did I get 21? How did you decide on 27?
Exactly. It's a good question. Very specific reasons, yes.
Is there any possibility that Annie and you will collaborate on any of these books, or she'll write any music?
So the question is whether my sister Poe and I will ever again collaborate. And I mean, wouldn't that be great?
Well, I miss her.
It was funny because when we were working together on House of Leaves, and for the record, for those of you who don't know, when House of Leaves came out, she released a CD called Haunted, and sometimes it's mislabeled as a soundtrack to House of Leaves. It's not. That piece of music influenced House of Leaves as much as House of Leaves influenced that piece of music. I was listening to tracks while I was writing. She was reading parts that were influencing the music. And there's that thing that happens when you're younger and it just all comes together, that you think it's gonna keep coming together like that forever, you know? And we had plans for doing something with Only Revolutions and stuff, but really coordinating that many, all those kinds of pieces is really, really difficult. And so I guess we've reached that place where it's like, no, it's not gonna happen, ever, and that means maybe something will happen. Yeah.
In your process for creating, how much would you say is like unbelievably thrilling and fun, and then how much is just arduous and really painful?
Great question. How much of it is just, you know, sublime transcendence, where I get to loll around on the top of Mount Olympus with the gods? How much of it is the sewage system below Mount Olympus? It's a lot of work. Yeah. It's, my father used to, my father was in showbiz, sort of the more, you know, sort of avant-garde, experimental part of that industry. And certainly in thought, that's how he always, you know, that's what he was always committed to. And he was part of Actors Studio in the 50s, and when he ended up at USC as the head of the theater school, he had a professional workshop outside of the school. And he would meet with young, promising actors and he would work with them. And I was fortunate to be able to attend a bunch of these workshops, you know. And I remember there was this scene where these two actors were just going at it. I mean, they were screaming and slapping each other and yelling and, you know, and breathing so hard at the end, like they just run a marathon. And he was like, so is that good? Did that feel good? And they were like, yeah, that felt great. And then he was like, okay, so now you've done it for yourself. Now you've got to do it for us. That's the job. So in the end, you follow first your feelings, what makes you feel great, you know, and then you toil with the rewrite, and there's a certain amount of when you're a writer, you have to be, or any kind of creator, you have to be a bit of a poison taster. You have to taste enough of the repetition, you know, so that you're kind of immune to it. Because most people who are not professionals can't do it. They can't go over their work 100 times, let alone twice, you know. But if you keep moving beyond it, you realize it isn't about that feeling anymore. Like if you're embracing that I want to feel good or I want to feel bad, then you're wasting energy in a way. And I think one of the things that's so thrilling for me about The Familiar, and gets back to the question of 27 volumes and how, is that it's pushed me to the very edge. The margins are so slim on the amount of energy that I have. Like it takes all of that. And what will be discovered out of that? Like if my life has been organized now to the point where I can create constantly for 9 or 10 hours a day, what is going to be the result of that? I mean, it's enormous work, and it requires a kind of like almost fitness, you know, there's almost an athletic approach, you know, at a certain point, you know, I like a good cocktail and a glass of wine down there. But as I was nearing it at the end, I realized like I couldn't even afford that little bit of haze, you know? If I had a tiny bit of like fog in my head in the morning, then I couldn't write at the level that I needed to write to produce this. So it is this curious thing that's kind of in one way liberating me and in one way encaging me. And I get up at 5 in the morning, work out, quick breakfast, and then I work, and I'm exhausted by the end of the night. And yeah, it's stressful, it's hard, but there are those moments when suddenly, you know, you find yourselves in the halls of Olympus, and you're kind of like, oh, I'm here again. This is cool. What can I take? In the back, yes.
What made you embrace breaking the literary rules? What made you embrace that strangeness when looking at literature at large? It's very hard to find. People don't want to take that chance to break the rules.
Another great question. Why did I don't want to give you some flip answer, because it's just like, why did I want to break those rules? I think I'll just go with the flip answer because I'm just a badass. I think it was. I mean, everyone. There's no one that's too young for this. You can go back. You can remember there's this moment where you realize you can dress like anyone, right? You can even change your voice. In fact, we all have changed our voices. We've kind of learned according to our culture, our family, or whatever. But then you hear something on TV, or you do a Jack Nicholson imitation, or whatever it is. You realize, like, oh man, I can suddenly talk like that, or I could maybe affect an English accent or something like that. But you suddenly realize there's this like real weird place where you could kind of do anything, And for some, it may last a long time. You're experimenting, doing all sorts of stuff. For other people, it may just be a flash, and you're like, no. This is who I am, this is where I come from, and this is how I'm going to act. And I think what I just decided to do was just never make that commitment to that one thing. Like I just sort of said, you know what? If I want to go this way, I'm going to do that. If I want to go this way, if I want to explore. And that kind of led me, writing off the edge of the page. Sort of let me let me see this and let me do that. And, I guess it was just constantly trying to keep the doors open and the windows open and kind of like keep things moving out there because I was always wary of these kind of restrictions that were constantly put on me. And I think I was fortunate in the sense that my parents were traveling around a lot. My father was making movies, and they were strange movies. And my parents were pretty wild when I look back at those. I mean, my father was making a documentary in West Africa, Ghana, during a revolution, and I was 1, and my mom was pregnant with my sister. Now, in LA, there are people that are like afraid to take their kid across town because maybe there's going to be like some flu outbreak over there. And my parents are on a plane in the late 60s, going to Ghana where there's malaria outbreaks, everything like, ooh, we're gonna make a movie or something like that. But I think I had this constant exposure just to different cultures, and I was from New York City. And then my parents suddenly said, let's move to Utah, and which by the way would have been sublime if we were Mormon. It would be an incredible experience, right? You arrive and you'd be surrounded by everyone that believes what you believe, but I wasn't Mormon, so it was a very strange experience there. So I constantly sort of saw where people said no, and then realized like, wait a minute, but there is a life beyond that no, and what makes sense, and how can we sort of ethically move outside through those windows too. It's not just about breaking stuff and stealing stuff, lying down and sleeping. So that's a kind of half answer, but it's probably true. I'm a badass.
So are you specifically set on the 27 novels? Have you specifically planned them all out, or do you think you'll ever go more or anything?
Did you hear that? Never have I heard that so far. Set on 27, could you do more? Right? Go for 33. It is mapped out. There's a huge architecture to the whole thing. But at the same time, I recognize that if I complete it successfully, it'll be, it'll be 12 years from now. So the future, offers all sorts of interruptions, chances, and so things could change. I want to be open to that. I come to Boise, I didn't realize there was a Basque section of town. There's a Basque film festival going on. I mean, that's got to go in there somewhere, right? So yeah, in one sense, it's kind of like how I was sort of flippantly saying it. Once you say it's never going to happen, you make room for it to happen. And the same thing. It's like it's there. There's a structure. I know how it ends. It'll break my heart if I don't get to write it all because it just, I love these characters. But at the same time, I also have to recognize that it's out of my hands too.
So with that said, do you have a contingency plan if you don't get to write?
No safety net here.
No.
Walking the wire. That's it. If it falls, it falls.
No one's gonna pick it up for you.
Who knows? It's it is a lot like a television series in the sense that if it all collapses, if there's just not enough of a readership, but 10 years later, people are like, oh, what happened? Let's do this. No, it's gone. The actors have moved on. We're doing sitcoms now. We're bitter.
Just don't turn into Martin.
Yeah. No, I won't.
Have time for one more question.
Do you, so this might be another crazy question, do you have plans of doing other novels in between
Another
chunks?
one.
I guess, do you see yourself just doing this for 10 to 12 years?
Yeah.
Or will you want to break off and do it?
No. Now, it's an interesting question, and it's very relevant to artists and writers. A lot of the time when you think you have an idea for something else, it's really for the thing you're working on. It's a terrifying idea, because let's say you're painting something, but you have an idea for a play. No, you don't. You're so focused on this painting that when your mind suddenly says, hey, write a play. Sure, part of it is fear. Like, oh my gosh, I'm committing to this thing that's made up. I mean, that's what I do every single day. I can't even say I write nonfiction. I'm just making shit up. But then all of a sudden you're like, okay, so that's scary. I mean, it's legitimately scary too. And there really isn't a safety net. I mean, when you're a writer and you're not working in TV and you don't have any of that kind of like Hollywood money, you are really, it's all there. You're saying, I believe that there are readers out there that are going to embrace something that's difficult, that's new, that's changing the way we think, that has a way of like looking at the world through a lens that has not been co-opted yet by some sort of commercial entity, right? So of course you're going to have a lot of other ideas, like I do. Learn how to play the guitar. But it's always an idea, I realize, that comes back to the book. Now you could say it's easier when you have 27 volumes because there's got to be room for an item, you know. But really, there's something. You're thinking of a play or you're painting something, and that play becomes a dialogue about something. So the brave thing in that moment is to welcome that gift that you've just been given and say, okay, how is this part of my painting? So that's right. How is this part of the familiar? How does this work back? Who is that? Is it Anwar? Is it Xanther? Is it Cass? Is it Luther? Who's coming to me now to tell me their story?
Awesome. So, Mark.
The night's not over.
He will be now signing books. We're going to have you at the center island, kind of behind our cash registers. So if you want to head back there, everybody stay seated for just a sec so he can get himself situated.
Put that in the back.
I will, yes.
Okay.